Entitled geezer stalks my mom over a candy bar. Every year my mother helps host a summer reading program for the public library she manages. So you can imagine a bunch of preparation and stress arises when having to host a 2-day-a-week program for approximately 250 guests. For this story specifically, she had to get a bunch of small buckets full of candies for the kids to take home. Sounds nice. Problem is, she didn't have any candies, so she decided to quickly go to our local Dollar General to get some. She walked in and got a buggy, going to the candy aisle and picking up at least 3 bags of some candy variants. 3 Musketeers, Kit Kats, and the important one for this story, Milky Ways. There were only 3 bags left, so she decided to grab them and put them into her buggy. Enter our entitled person. An old-looking man with glasses that have clipped-on shades and a scraggly-looking beard walks into the aisle and searches around the shelves. Then he saw my mom in her buggy and walked over to her. He kind of creeped around her, peering over her and into her buggy. So you can imagine she's uncomfortable. And then the old man speaks. Entitled Grandpa asks, "Did you take all the Milky Ways?" "Yes," she said, obviously confused. He asked her why, and then immediately asked her to give him a bag. So, confused as heck right now, she just replied, "I don't want to. I got these, and I'd like to take them with me."
"Well, why?" asked Entitled Grandpa. "Why don't you get some other candy and give me some Milky Ways?"
He was getting annoyed, but my mother wasn't going to budge. "Because," she said, "they're for a library program, and I can only take these because some of the kids have nut allergies."
"Well, just give me one," he said. "You don't need all 3.
He had started to argue with her at this point, and he tried to move to reach into her buggy, but she scooted it away as he did so. She continued to tell him that these candies were hers, and he continued telling her to substitute them with something else. He was pretty much demanding at this point that she grab a different candy, so my mom replied, "Why don't you do the same?" She was getting a bit snappy, and turned away to get a few more things before heading to the register to check out. While she was doing so, the entitled grandpa kept following her and demanding she hand over a bag to him, overall just acting selfish and entitled. He was quite literally acting like an angry child who'd just been told no in a candy store. So she made it to the register, and the man is still following her. But what's weird is that there are now 2 people with their own buggies behind my mom. So entitled grandpa is 4th in line, heckling and just stalking her about some Milky Ways. So my mom now decides she's had enough and turns to him. "Can you please stop?" she said. "You've been following me around the store, and I'm not going to give you some Milky Ways." She then turned to the worker at the register before continuing back to Grandpa, "And I don't mean to give y'all competition, but there's a Family Dollar right across the street, so go and get your stuff there." Now pretty much everyone is looking back and forth from her to entitled Grandpa. He says,
"Well, I don't want to, and I want my Milky Ways."
At this point, my mom has been checked out and she pushes her buggy to leave the store. Meanwhile, the man is still following her and asking for the Milky Ways, even following her to her car. Apparently, they were parked next to each other. Such luck, I know. Again, the man asks for the Milky Ways. My mom retorts with, "Can you please stop stalking me and just go?"
"Not until I get what I want,"
he said. "Well," she said, "you'll have to wait." And with that, she loads up her stuff and pushes the buggy away before getting into her car. Meanwhile, entitled Grandpa is grumbling to himself and cursing under his breath about how this woman wouldn't give him her already paid-for goods. And with that, she drove off. The moral? Be sure to watch out for Dollar General elders. Sometimes these stories just have no heroes whatsoever. The old man is definitely in the wrong here, but it hardly makes a person look heroic when they refuse to share something after they've just cleared out the shelf. It's also important to remember that Milky Ways are one of many, many chocolate bars that those with severe allergies tend to avoid due to risk of cross-contamination. So this original poster's mom actually might be a hero to people who wish there were fewer children in the world. Granted, that's the other problem with guys like the man in this story. Some people wrap you up in an argument so childish, it's almost impossible not to sound equally childish the moment you argue back. That's the real curse of entitlement. It brings all of us down a peg, even when the principles are on our side. Rabid Karen screams at me for not letting a dog bite her child. I was at a small dog park, which is usually calm. Kids under 12 are not allowed. This mom brought her 7-year-old son. He was small, but stayed out of the way. I ended up talking to him because he wanted to know what I was teaching my dog. I was extremely impressed by how polite and kind this kid was. Everything was going fine until the kid's own dog came over. The kid hid behind me and whispered, "He's not a nice dog at all." The boy was shaking. Eventually, the dog ran off. The boy was petting my dog after asking and following my instructions. His dog comes running back. Then he jumped up, trying to bite. I scooped the boy up. He thanked me and said his dog just bites sometimes. The mother came over screaming. I told her to get her dog. She told me I had no right to touch her son. She starts ranting about stranger danger and how you can never be too safe today. I told her that their dog was jeopardizing his safety. I also told her that if she cared at all, she should have been watching her son and her dog. She started screeching about how I have no idea how hard it is to be a parent, that I need to mind my own business, and that the dog park was supposed to be a safe place. I told her it's supposed to be a safe place for dogs, not kids. I then told this woman that the dog was going to bite her son. She said the dog only bites when it's playing, and did not mean it. This dog ran across the park to come bite the kid. But Mom says the dog is just a little jealous of the kid because they have to share attention now. She keeps making excuses and blaming the poor kid. I wish I could have taken him with me. Looking back, maybe I should have called CPS or animal control. It does not sit right with me. I like kids. I love teaching them about dogs. My dog is extremely well trained and loves kids. I love getting to show kids how to treat dogs respectfully. To clear things up, this original poster was right not to call CPS or animal control. Since the kid had no visible marks, the dog was probably nipping instead of actual biting, so it's unlikely that animal control would have taken it away, and CPS isn't going to put a child through the trauma of foster care over a 10-pound dog. None of this means that Karen was right, of course. Some dogs really do play bite, but a parent should still prioritize their children over the dogs. If the child is terrified of this little furball, then it's doing more than enough damage, even if it hasn't broken skin yet. And if Karen can't keep her son from being targeted by this thing, then maybe she should give it to a family with more time to train it. Entitled mom thinks it's the babysitter's job to pay her kids' dental bills. Years ago, I would often babysit my neighbor's 9 or 10-year-old daughter. My neighbor was a divorced father with the kind of ex that would send spreadsheets of child-rearing expenses calculated to the penny. She'd also send weekly invoices, complete with terms and penalties of her own choosing for late payments. He paid big child support, and generally paid her invoices on time, because she would cut off access to the kiddo if he didn't. His ex, the snake, and I had basic text messaging contact. She and I had a previous dust-up because a sudden weather change necessitated a jacket for kiddo. We popped into the nearest discount store, and I let her pick a jacket. Kiddo loved it, but her mother threw a giant fit at me because it wasn't brand name. I blew it off, and the neighbor and I laughed about it when he reimbursed me. His ex gave me the silent treatment. Darn. Time moved forward. Father always reimbursed kiddo's expenses and encouraged fun and healthy activities. One day, he called me and apologized that he was getting held up at work, and kiddo had an orthodontist appointment. He asked me to take her. I agreed, and he called the dentist to authorize. We got there, and they wouldn't see her without a payment of $225. It was a necessary appointment since kiddo's braces were hurting her. Dad wasn't available, but I knew he would reimburse me, so I put it on my credit card rather than call her snake of a mother. Kiddo got patched up, Dad reimbursed me, I paid off the card and didn't use it again afterward. A few months later, I got a past due call from my card company about repeated charges from the orthodontist. I let Dad know and called the orthodontist, who told me I signed an automatic payment agreement. I gave my "heck no, I'm just the babysitter" speech. I didn't get far with them, so I canceled the card. Dad apologized profusely and reimbursed me. A month later, I get a nasty call from the orthodontist about my card being declined. I kindly informed them I'm not the parent and provided the snake's phone number. About an hour later, the snake is furiously calling and texting me. I silenced my phone and didn't look at it until later. She maxed out my voicemail, and all of her text messages were about how I was mistreating her child by denying the kid medical care. One voicemail was from the police, letting me know she filed a complaint, telling me how I could get a copy for my attorney, and inquiring about whether I wanted to file a counter-complaint. I sure did. I eventually moved out of state. The prosecutor called me once just to ask questions. Then I never heard back from them. For clarification, friends, credit card fraud is illegal. Charging stuff to someone else's card is credit card fraud. She basically ratted her own self out to the police by filing a complaint that I wouldn't let her steal from me anymore. She probably pled guilty to theft by deception, forgery, both, and or a combination of similar charges. I've never cared enough to try and find out. Last I heard from Kiddo's grandmother, the snake took a plea bargain. Dad got custody, and Grandma was enjoying a lot more time with Kiddo. This is both the greatest and saddest thing about most Karens. On one hand, they're so eager for revenge that they usually wind up blindly walking into their own karma. But it's sad that anyone could be so convinced they're right that they'd actually rat themselves out just to try and prove it. This woman seemed to honestly believe that the original poster owed her whatever she demanded. Based on the bills she was sending OP's neighbor, she probably treats everyone this way. The good news is that Karen's blunders put the kid back in the hands of the better parent. Now the dad can teach his daughter to be more like him and less like that snake of a mother. Idiot coworkers demand we turn off the lights and AC during a heat wave. The current heat wave reminded me of a massive blowout at a previous job back in 2017. I returned to work after a period of sickness. I come into the office to find that the lights are off and the air is off too. Now, in the UK, air conditioning is still not standard, and being in an office where the sun hits you most of the day, it was bliss to have it on. We had filters on our windows to stop people looking in and seeing our computer screens, but they did not stop the heat coming through. The office was like an oven. My little desk fan did nothing, and having the lights off meant that I could barely see my screen, let alone my desk. I brought this up with my manager, who was the office health and safety rep, and was told that 2 of the 20 people in the office didn't like the lights on because it made them feel hotter, so they turned all the lights off. I then asked if they felt hot, why turn off the air conditioner? And the answer? Because they didn't like the air blowing on them where they sat. The temperature in the office was hitting 26 degrees Celsius, about 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and the light levels were like trying to work at dusk. I told my boss that I could not work under these conditions because they were triggering the same symptoms that I had been off work with. He told me to go work in another office. I then tried to bring it up with the 2 people who caused this by asking why they had chosen to turn off the air conditioner and the lights. I was told that they felt too hot with the lights on, and the air conditioner blew directly on them, which was too annoying. Now, the lighting was ultra-low emission lighting, so it gave out no heat. And when I said this, I was told that it didn't matter because it was how they felt, and if you have a problem with that, then go work somewhere else. I put my concerns in writing to my boss, and got an email telling me to go find another office to work in. But before I could move, he would have to approve it. Now, I was on the company health and safety team, which sat over the office reps, and at the next meeting, I brought up that I understood there were no minimum or maximum heat requirements for an office, but I wasn't sure what we were to do if it was hitting 26 degrees Celsius and the air conditioner was off. I was told by our CFO to turn on the air. I explained that 2 out of 20 people didn't want it. The CFO scribbled something down and said he'd look into it. I then brought up minimum light levels, for which there is legislation, and how we were falling below those. My hubby had lent me a light meter to check, which I did one lunchtime when most of the team were out. The CFO asked why it was so dark, and I said that the same 2 people insisted on all the lights being off because it felt hotter with them on. Again, frantic scrambling. I was off the next day, and then it was the weekend. I came in on Monday to find the air on, the lights on, and the 2 moaners glaring at me. Then my boss calls me into a meeting and tells me that he got shouted at by his boss because the CFO had come to him and torn him a new one over the lights and air conditioning. Seems the CFO had come into the office on Friday when the managers and his boss had gone out for lunch together with the 2 moaners. You can see now how those 2 had so much influence. They'd talked with the rest of the office about the conditions, and everyone had said that it was awful. He then waited for the bosses to come back, sitting in the big boss's office. Turns out they had a long lunch. The CFO proceeded to get into it with him about breaking health and safety regulations over the lighting, and that if 2 out of 20 didn't like the office, then they had to move, and not inflict the situation on everyone else. Air conditioning was turned on, lights were turned on, and the CFO left. The 2 moaners went straight to the big boss and whined with their manager, and were told that nothing could be done for them, except they had to find a different office if they didn't like it. They went on about their rights, and Big Boss told them that it was not up for discussion. The 2 guys who were responsible for health and safety for the whole company had come in with the CFO, checked the light levels, and they were lower than I had thought. we were in serious non-compliance. So when I got called into the meeting with my boss, he was upset because I had gone to the Health and Safety Committee and not gone through him. I reminded him that I had brought it up verbally and in an email, and he had emailed back that if I was unhappy, I should move offices. Well, Big Boss had thrown my boss and the boss of the two moaners under the bus, and said he knew nothing of it. So now my boss was in trouble as the Health and Safety Office rep for allowing it to happen, when he was supposed to check regulations before making decisions. Whilst I got the lights and air conditioning back on, it was a small victory. I left 3 months later. It's probably best that OP left this office. Even if there were no other situations like this one, it's never healthy working in an office where the boss plays favorites. It doesn't really make sense that these unlikable, entitled people get so much sway in the workplace to begin with. But it happens all the time. People who are terrible at their jobs, and even worse to be around, seem to have a way of impressing the higher-ups. It makes no sense. And even though it's good that OP got this one situation resolved, these people won't learn a thing. Then again, maybe leaving was an overreaction. Could things have gotten better if they'd stayed? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Click one of the videos on screen right now.